The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead as I leaned against the metal shelving unit, my fingers absently tracing the edge of a dusty cardboard box. The storage room smelled like stale air and forgotten things, old paperwork, and used office supplies, and the faintest hint of lemon cleaner that hadn't been used in months. It was quiet here, almost peaceful, if not for the fact that I just realized the door had clicked shut behind me. Great, I muttered under my breath, tugging at the handle. Locked. Of course it was locked. Because why wouldn't it be? My day had already been a series of small disasters. Spilling coffee on my shirt during the morning meeting, accidentally sending an email to the entire company instead of just my boss, and now this. Trapped in a storage room, like some cliché from a bad sitcom. I sighed, running a hand through my hair, which was probably sticking up in 5 different directions by now. Just perfect. And then there was Alex. Alex, who always seemed to have his life together, even when mine felt like it was falling apart. Alex, who everyone loved because he was effortlessly charming, ridiculously good-looking, and somehow managed to make even the most mundane tasks seem exciting. He was also straight, or so I assumed. Not that I spent much time thinking about it. Okay, maybe I did, but only in passing. Definitely not obsessively. We'd been friends since college, though friends didn't quite capture what we were. We weren't close enough to share everything, but we weren't distant either. There was something between us, a kind of unspoken understanding that went beyond friendship, though I could never put my finger on exactly what it was. Maybe it was the way he listened when I talked, really listened, like my words mattered more than they probably did. Or the way his laughter filled a room, warm and inviting, making you want to laugh along with him even if you didn't know why. Whatever it was, it made being around him both comforting and excruciating all at once, which is why when the door creaked open moments later and Alex poked his head inside, my stomach did a little flip. "What are you doing in here?" he asked, his voice teasing but tinged with concern. "Hiding from Karen in accounting again?" I forced a laugh, though it came out sounding more awkward than amused. "No, I'm just taking inventory," I lied, gesturing vaguely at the shelf around me. "Very important stuff." He raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced, but stepped inside anyway, letting the door swing shut behind him. That's when I heard it, the soft click of the lock engaging. "Oh no," Alex said, turning back toward the door. He tried the handle, pulling harder than necessary before groaning in frustration. "You've got to be kidding me." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched between us, heavy and charged, as the reality of our situation sank in. We were stuck, together, in a tiny storage room with nothing but stacks of forgotten office supplies and each other for company. "This is fine," I said finally, trying to sound casual despite the sudden tightness in my chest. "We'll figure it out. Someone will notice we're missing eventually." Alex turned to face me, leaning back against the door with his arms crossed over his chest. His expression was calm, but there was something else there too, something unreadable that made my pulse quicken. "Yeah, sure," he said, his tone light, but his eyes lingering on mine just a second too long. "In the meantime, guess we've got nothing better to do than talk." Talk, right? Because being trapped in a confined space with the one person I couldn't stop thinking about wasn't stressful enough. "So," Alex began, pushing off the door and stepping closer. "What's going on with you lately? You seem distracted." His question caught me off guard, and I hesitated, searching for an answer that wouldn't give too much away. "Just work stuff," I said evasively. "You know how it is." He tilted his head, studying me with that same intense focus that always made me feel like he could see right through me. Could have sworn it was something else. Before I could respond, he reached up to adjust one of the shelves above my head, his arm brushing against mine in the process. It was such a small thing, barely even contact, but it sent a jolt of electricity coursing through me. I swallowed hard, willing myself to stay composed. "You're imagining things," I said, injecting as much humor into my voice as I could muster. "Maybe the lack of oxygen in here is getting to your brain." Alex chuckled, lowering his arm and stepping back slightly. But instead of moving away completely, he stayed close, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off him, smell the faint trace of cologne clinging to his skin. "Maybe," he said softly, his gaze locking onto mine. Or maybe I'm just paying attention. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning, and for the first time, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the only one feeling this strange, magnetic pull. Neither of us moved. Time seemed to slow, stretching out endlessly as we stood there, suspended in the moment. And then, without warning, Alex took another step forward, closing the distance between us entirely. His hand found mine, his fingers intertwining with mine in a gesture so natural it felt like it had been waiting to happen all along. "I've been wanting to do this for a while," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. My heart raced, my mind struggling to catch up with what was happening. "But you're straight?" he finished for me, a wry smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Yeah, that's what I thought too. Turns out, labels aren't always as clear-cut as we think." And with that, he leaned in, his lips brushing against mine in a kiss that was tentative at first but quickly deepened, igniting a fire within me that I hadn't known was possible. In that moment, everything else faded away. The cramped storage room, the locked door, the outside world. All that mattered was him and me, and the undeniable connection that had been simmering beneath the surface all along. As the kiss ended, Alex pulled back slightly, his forehead resting against mine. "So," he murmured, his breath warm against my lips, "what happens now?" I smiled, my heart swelling with a mix of emotions I couldn't begin to untangle. "Now," I said softly, "we figure it out. Together." The storage room felt smaller now, the air thick with unspoken words and lingering questions. My heart was still racing from the kiss, my mind struggling to reconcile what had just happened with everything I thought I knew about Alex and myself. He stepped back slightly, giving me space but keeping his hand firmly in mine, as if afraid I might slip away. His eyes searched mine, looking for something, reassurance, maybe, or permission to keep going. I didn't know what to say. How could I? This wasn't supposed to happen. Alex was straight. Or at least, that's what I'd always assumed. And yet here we were, standing in this cramped, dimly lit room, our lives irrevocably changed by a single moment of vulnerability. "I should have said something sooner," Alex admitted, his voice low and tinged with regret. "But I didn't know how. I mean, you're you, and well, I thought I was one thing, but lately," he trailed off, shaking his head. "It's complicated." I let out a shaky laugh, trying to lighten the mood, even though my chest felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. "Complicated doesn't even begin to cover it." Alex smiled faintly, his thumb brushing over the back of my hand in a gesture so gentle it made my breath hitch. "Fair point, but I don't want to pretend anymore. Not with you." His words sent a shiver down my spine, both thrilling and terrifying. Part of me wanted to believe him, to let myself fall into this unexpected connection, but another part, louder and more insistent, screamed caution. What if this was just a fleeting impulse? What if he woke up tomorrow and realized he'd made a mistake? The thought alone was enough to make my stomach churn. "You don't have to decide anything right now," Alex said softly, as if sensing my inner turmoil. "We could take it slow, figure things out together." "Together?" I echoed, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. It sounded nice, too nice, but I couldn't shake the nagging voice in the back of my head reminding me of all the reasons this wouldn't work. Society wasn't exactly kind to people like us, or rather, people like me. Growing up, I'd learned early on to keep parts of myself hidden, to bury my feelings deep where no one could see them. Even now, years later, those habits were hard to break. Being open about who I was and who I wanted still felt dangerous, like stepping on a thin ice that might crack at any moment. But Alex made me want to try. There was something about the way he looked at me, like I was the only person in the world who mattered, that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't in years. Maybe ever. And that scared me almost as much as the idea of rejection did. Before I could overthink it further, the sound of muffled voices outside the door broke the spell. Someone was coming. "We should probably call for help," I said quickly, pulling my hand from Alex's and taking a step back. The loss of contact left me feeling oddly cold, exposed. Alex nodded, though he looked reluctant to let go of the moment. "Yeah, good idea." He knocked on the door, calling out until the voices grew closer. A few minutes later, Karen from accounting appeared, her expression shifting from confusion to amusement when she saw us standing there together. "Well, this is cozy," she teased, raising an eyebrow. "Need a minute? Or can I let you out?" I opened my mouth to respond, but Alex beat me to it. "We're good," he said smoothly, flashing her one of his trademark grins. "Thanks for saving us." As soon as we stepped out of the storage room and into the bright fluorescent lights of the office hallway, reality came rushing back. People were watching us, whispering behind their hands. Whether they suspected anything or were simply amused by the spectacle of two co-workers getting locked in a supply closet, I couldn't tell. Either way, it made my skin crawl. Back at my desk, I tried to focus on work, but my thoughts kept drifting back to Alex. To the way his lips had felt against mine, the warmth of his hand in mine, the raw honesty in his voice when he'd said he didn't want to pretend anymore. It was intoxicating and completely terrifying. By the time the workday ended, I was exhausted, emotionally drained from hours of pretending everything was normal while my mind replayed every second of that encounter on loop. As I packed up my things to leave, Alex appeared beside me, leaning casually against the edge of my desk. "Hey," he said, his tone light but his eyes serious. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "Now, yeah, unless you've got plans." He paused, then added, "Please." There was something in his voice, a quiet desperation, that made it impossible to say no. "Okay," I relented, grabbing my bag. "Let's go." We ended up at a small cafe a few blocks away, tucked into a corner booth where we could talk without fear of being overheard. For a while, neither of us spoke, the silence stretching between us like a fragile thread. Finally, Alex broke it. "I know today was intense," he began, his fingers tracing patterns on the surface of the table. "And I don't expect you to have all the answers right away. Hell, I don't even know if I do. But I need you to know that what happened back there, it wasn't a mistake." My throat tightened, making it hard to swallow. "You don't get to just flip a switch, Alex. You can't wake up one day and decide you're not straight anymore because it's convenient." "I'm not saying it's convenient," he shot back, his voice rising slightly before he caught himself and lowered it again. "I'm saying it's real. Whatever this is between us, it's real. And yeah, maybe I don't have all the answers yet, but I know I can't ignore it anymore." His words hit me like a punch to the gut, leaving me breathless. Because as much as I wanted to argue, to push him away and protect myself from the inevitable heartbreak, I couldn't deny the truth in what he was saying. Something had shifted between us today, something irreversible. And whether I liked it or not, I was already falling for him. "I'm scared," I admitted finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "Of what this means. Of what people will say. Of what happens if it doesn't work." Alex reached across the table, his hand covering mine. "So am I," he said honestly. "But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe we couldn't predict the future, and maybe the road ahead would be messy and uncertain. But as long as we faced it together, I thought maybe, just maybe, we could figure it out. The cafe was warm, its air thick with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and baked goods. It felt like a sanctuary after the chaos of the office, a place where time slowed down just enough for us to breathe. Alex sat across from me, his fingers still resting lightly on mine, as if afraid I might pull away. I didn't, not because I wasn't tempted, but because his touch grounded me in a way I hadn't realized I needed. "You know," he said, breaking the quiet that had settled between us, "I've always liked this place. The coffee's decent, sure, but it's more than that. It feels safe." His words caught me off guard. Safe wasn't a word I associated with Alex. He was the kind of person who thrived in the spotlight, who seemed so confident and self-assured that it was easy to forget he might have doubts or fears of his own. But there was something vulnerable in his tone now, something raw that made my chest ache. "Safe?" I echoed, raising an eyebrow. "You? Mr. Nothing Phases Me?" He chuckled, the sound low and warm, sending a ripple of comfort through me. "Yeah, okay, maybe that's not how most people see me, but you're different. You always have been." I looked down at our hands, his larger one enveloping mine, and felt a lump rise in my throat. Different. That word carried so much weight, didn't it? For years, I tried to blend in, to be invisible in all the ways that mattered. Being different had never felt like a gift. It had felt like a burden. But here, with Alex, it felt like something else entirely. Something precious that we stayed at the cafe longer than either of us intended, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about his childhood, growing up in a small town where fitting in meant following rules you didn't question. I shared stories about my awkward teenage years, the endless struggle to reconcile who I was with who I thought I should be. There were moments when laughter bubbled up between us, light and unguarded, and others when silence stretched, heavy with unspoken understanding by the time we left. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The streets were quieter now, the hum of the city softened by the cool evening air. We walked side by side, neither of us saying much, but the space between us felt charged, alive with possibility. At one point, Alex stopped abruptly, turning to face me. His eyes searched mine, filled with a mixture of curiosity and determination. "Do you trust me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I blinked, startled by the question. Trust wasn't something I gave easily, especially not to someone who had spent years convincing me they were untouchable. But standing there, under the glow of a flickering street lamp, I realized I did. Maybe I always had. "Yes," I said finally, the word feeling both terrifying and liberating as it left my lips. The slow smile spread across his face, lighting up his features in a way that made my heart skip a beat. Without another word, he reached out, intertwining his fingers with mine. It was such a simple gesture, yet it sent a jolt of electricity coursing through me, grounding me even as it set my nerves alight. "Good," he murmured, tugging me gently forward. "Because I want to show you something." We ended up at a park I'd never been to before, tucked away in a part of the city that felt almost forgotten. The trees were tall and ancient, their branches swaying softly in the breeze. A narrow path led us deeper into the greenery until we reached a clearing overlooking a small pond. The surface of the water shimmered under the moonlight, rippling gently as frogs croaked in the distance. "This is beautiful," I breathed, taking in the scene around us. It was peaceful here, untouched by the noise and chaos of everyday life. "I come here sometimes when I need to think," Alex admitted, his voice soft. "It helps me clear my head." I glanced at him, noting the way the moonlight played across his face, highlighting the faint stubble along his jawline and the curve of his lips. He looked impossibly handsome, but it wasn't just his appearance that captivated me. It was the vulnerability he let me see, the pieces of himself he was willing to share. We sat down on a bench near the edge of the pond, close enough that our shoulders brushed occasionally. For a while, we simply listened to the sounds of the night, the rustling leaves, the distant chirping of crickets, the occasional splash of a fish breaking the surface of the water. It was companionable, easy, and yet beneath the surface, there was a tension building, an awareness of what lay unspoken between us. "You ever wonder what it would be like?" Alex asked suddenly, his voice cutting through the quiet. "To just stop pretending? To live your life exactly how you want, without worrying about what anyone else thinks?" I stiffened, caught off guard by the question. Of course I'd wondered. Who hadn't? But imagining it and actually doing it were two very different things. "Sometimes," I admitted cautiously, "but it's not that simple, is it? People talk. They judge. And once you put yourself out there, there's no going back." Alex nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Yeah, I get that. But isn't it exhausting carrying all that weight? Always second-guessing yourself, hiding parts of who you are because you're scared of what might happen." His words struck a chord deep within me, stirring emotions I'd buried long ago. Exhausting didn't even begin to cover it. Every day was a balancing act, walking the tightrope between authenticity and survival. Some days, I managed better than others. Other days, the pressure felt unbearable. "I don't know," I said honestly, my voice trembling slightly. "What if I'm not strong enough? What if I lose everything?" Alex turned to face me fully, his gaze steady and unwavering. "You're stronger than you think," he said firmly. And you're not alone. Not anymore. His conviction was staggering, leaving me breathless. No one had ever looked at me the way Alex was looking at me now, with such unwavering belief, such fierce protectiveness. It made me want to believe him, to let myself lean into the safety he offered. But old habits die hard, and fear has a way of clinging to you long after it's served its purpose. I want to believe you, I whispered, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. But it's hard. I know, he said softly, reaching up to cup my cheek. His thumb brushed away a stray tear, the touch feather-light but achingly tender. And I'm not asking you to figure it all out overnight. Just take it one step at a time. With me. The sincerity in his voice undid me, breaking down the walls I'd built around my heart piece by piece. In that moment, I wanted nothing more than to surrender, to let go of the fear and doubt, and simply exist in the warmth of his presence. I did it. I leaned into him, resting my forehead against his shoulder as his arms came around me, pulling me close. His embrace was firm but gentle, protective but inviting, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to feel safe. Truly safe. As we sat there together, wrapped in each other's arms beneath the vast expanse of stars, I couldn't help but marvel at how far we'd come in such a short amount of time. From coworkers to friends to whatever this was. It was messy and uncertain and terrifying, but it was also real. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The days that followed our visit to the park blurred together in a haze of stolen glances and lingering touches. Alex and I had fallen into an unspoken rhythm, finding excuses to spend time together whenever we could, grabbing coffee before work, taking long walks during lunch breaks, sitting side by side in quiet moments when no one else was around. Each interaction felt like a step closer to something neither of us dared to name aloud. Yet it hung between us, electric and undeniable. But as much as I wanted to let myself fall completely, fear kept me tethered to the edge. What if this was all some fleeting phase for him? What if he woke up one day and realized he'd made a mistake? The questions haunted me, gnawing at the fragile hope I'd allowed myself to feel. And then there was the outside world, the judgmental stares, the whispered comments, the constant reminder that love like ours wasn't always accepted. It weighed on me, pressing down until it felt hard to breathe. One evening, after another long day at work, Alex suggested we meet up again. Just you and me, he said with a grin that made my stomach flip. No interruptions. I hesitated, torn between excitement and apprehension. Where are we going? It's a surprise, he replied cryptically, his eyes sparkling with mischief. Trust me. And somehow, despite everything I did, we ended up at a secluded beach on the outskirts of town, far from the crowds and noise of the city. The sand was cool beneath my feet, the salty breeze tangling my hair as waves crashed against the shore in rhythmic bursts. A blanket lay spread out near the water's edge, surrounded by candles flickering softly in the twilight. It was breathtakingly beautiful and utterly unexpected. This is incredible, I said, turning to Alex with wide eyes. Did you do all this? He shrugged, though the faint blush creeping up his neck betrayed his pride. I figure we deserve something special. No distractions, just us. My heart swelled, but so did the lump in my throat. This wasn't just romantic. It was intimate in a way that left me feeling exposed, vulnerable. As much as I wanted to lose myself in the moment, I couldn't shake the nagging voice in the back of my head reminding me of all the reasons this couldn't last. Alex must have noticed my hesitation because he stepped closer, his hands resting lightly on my shoulders. Hey, he said softly, tilting my chin up so our eyes met. What's wrong? Nothing. I lied automatically, looking away. But Alex wasn't having it. Don't shut me out, he urged, his tone firm but gentle. Talk to me. I sighed, the weight of everything I'd been holding back threatening to spill over. It's just this feels too good to be true. You feel too good to be true. And I can't stop thinking about what happens when reality catches up with us. When people find out, when you realize that I'm not who you thought I was, he finished for me, his voice tinged with sadness. Or maybe when you realize I'm exactly who I've always been. His words hit me like a punch to the gut, forcing me to confront the truth I'd been avoiding. He wasn't perfect. He never claimed to be. But he was here, standing in front of me, willing to face whatever came next. And wasn't that more than I'd ever dare to hope for? I'm scared, I admitted finally, my voice trembling. Of getting hurt. Of ruining what we have. Of losing you. For a moment, Alex didn't say anything. Instead, he pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly as if trying to shield me from the storm raging inside me. His warmth enveloped me, steady and grounding, and I clung to him like a lifeline. "You're not going to lose me," he murmured into my hair, his breath warm against my skin. "Not unless you push me away. And even then, I'll fight like hell to stay." His words broke something open within me, releasing a flood of emotions I'd spent years burying. Tears spilled down my cheeks, hot and uncontrollable, as I buried my face in his chest. For so long, I'd carried this burden alone, convinced that no one could understand. But Alex wasn't just anyone. He saw me, not the version of myself I showed the world, but the messy, complicated, deeply flawed person underneath. And instead of running, he stayed. When the tears finally subsided, Alex cupped my face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the last remnants of moisture. His gaze was intense, searching mine as if memorizing every detail. "I need you to hear me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This isn't a phase. It's not some experiment or curiosity. It's you. It's always been you." Before I could respond, he leaned in, his lips meeting mine in a kiss that was both tender and desperate. It wasn't our first kiss that had happened in the storage room, but it felt different this time. Deeper, more meaningful, like a promise whispered without words that I melted into him, my hands clutching at his shirt as the world around us faded away. The sound of the waves, the flicker of the candles, the cool night air, it all disappeared, leaving only the two of us. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the doubts, not the fears, not the voices telling me this couldn't work. All that existed was Alex and the overwhelming certainty that I loved him. When the kiss ended, we stayed like that for a while, foreheads pressed together, breathing each other in. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. Words would have felt inadequate, unable to capture the magnitude of what had just passed between us. Eventually, Alex pulled back slightly, his expression soft but serious. "So," he said, a hint of nervousness creeping into his voice. "What now?" I smiled through the lingering tears, reaching up to tangle my fingers in his hair. "Now," I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions still swirling inside me. "We figure it out. Together." And for the first time, I truly believed it. The days following that night on the beach felt like walking a tightrope. Everything had changed, yet nothing had. Not really. Alex and I were still navigating the same world we'd been in before. But now there was this new, fragile thing between us, trembling under the weight of unspoken truths and external pressures. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once, like standing on the edge of a cliff with no idea whether jumping would lead to flight or free fall. Like tea first, it was easy to pretend everything was fine. We fell into a rhythm of stolen moments, lingering glances across the office, quick texts during meetings, quiet dinners after work where we could breathe freely without fear of prying eyes. But the illusion of normalcy couldn't last forever. The cracks began to show almost immediately, small at first, but growing wider with each passing day. IT started with whispers. At first, I thought I was imagining them. The subtle shifts in tone when colleagues spoke to me, the way conversations would stop abruptly when I entered a room. But soon, it became impossible to ignore. Karen from accounting made a pointed comment about how cozy Alex and I seemed lately. Someone else joked about us being inseparable. Each remark felt like a needle prick, sharp and stinging, reminding me that our secret wasn't as safe as I'd hoped. Alex noticed too, though he handled it differently than I did. Where I wanted to shrink into myself, to disappear until the attention faded, he stood taller, meeting every sideways glance with a confident smile. It was infuriating sometimes how effortlessly he seemed to brush off the judgment. Didn't he understand what was at stake? Or maybe he did, and that's why he acted the way he did. To protect us both. One afternoon, as we sat side by side in the break room, Alex leaned over and whispered, "You're doing that thing again." "What thing?" I asked, feigning innocence even though I knew exactly what he meant. "That thing where you try to make yourself invisible," he said, his voice low but firm. "Stop it. You don't have anything to be ashamed of." I bristled, my defenses rising instinctively. "Easy for you to say. You're not the one everyone's talking about." His expression softened, and he reached out to rest a hand on my knee beneath the table. "They're talking about me too, you know." "Yeah, but they're not looking at you the same way." I shot back, my voice sharper than I intended. "To them, you're just experimenting. Curious. But me? I'm the gay guy who corrupted you." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and bitter. I regretted them almost instantly, but Alex didn't flinch. Instead, he nodded slowly, his jaw tightening ever so slightly. "You think I don't know that?" he said quietly. "You think I don't see the looks, hear the comments? Trust me, I do. And yeah, maybe they'll never see me the way they see you. But that doesn't change how I feel. About you. About us." His conviction left me speechless, the anger draining out of me as quickly as it had risen. He wasn't wrong. We were in this together, whether the world liked it or not. But knowing that didn't make it any easier to face. Things came to a head a few weeks later when Alex's sister showed up at the office unexpectedly. She was older than him by a few years, strikingly beautiful with an air of authority that commanded attention wherever she went. I'd met her once before at a company holiday party, and while she'd been polite enough, there was something about her that made me uneasy. Maybe it was the way she looked at people, as if she could peel back their layers with a single glance. She spotted us immediately, her gaze narrowing as she took in the proximity between Alex and me. Well, she said, her tone dripping with amusement. "Looks like someone's gotten cozy." Alex stiffened beside me, his usual confidence faltering for the briefest moment. "Hey, Sarah, what are you doing here?" "I came to see you, obviously," she replied, her smile razor-sharp. "But it seems I've interrupted something. Or should I say someone?" Her words landed like a punch, sending a ripple of tension through the room. I felt my cheeks burn, my stomach twisting into knots as I forced myself to meet her gaze. "We were just talking," I said evenly, though my voice betrayed me with a slight waver. Sarah raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "Sure you were. Listen, Alex, can I borrow you for a minute?" Privately, before Alex could respond, she grabbed his arm and pulled him away, leaving me standing there alone, acutely aware of the stares boring into my back. My chest tightened, panic bubbling up as I tried to convince myself it wasn't as bad as it seemed. But deep down, I knew better. When Alex returned 20 minutes later, his expression was unreadable. He didn't say anything at first, simply motioned for me to follow him into an empty conference room. Once the door was closed behind us, he let out a long breath, running a hand through his hair. "She knows," he said finally, his voice strained. "Or at least, she suspects." My heart sank, dread pooling in my stomach. "What did she say?" "She asked if there was something going on between us," he admitted, avoiding my eyes. I didn't deny it. "You didn't." I cut myself off, shaking my head in disbelief. "Why would you do that? Do you realize what this means?" "Your family, my family isn't perfect," he interrupted, his tone firm. "And neither am I. But I'm done hiding, okay? Done pretending to be someone I'm not because it's easier for everyone else." His words hit me like a tidal wave, knocking the wind out of me. As much as I admired his courage, I couldn't help but wonder if he fully understood the consequences. Coming out wasn't just about him. It affected everyone around him, including me. And while I wanted nothing more than stand by his side, I couldn't shake the fear that this would end badly for both of us. "What happens now?" I asked softly, my voice barely above a whisper, as he stepped closer, taking my hands in his. "Now, we take it one step at a time, together." But even as he said the words, I couldn't help but wonder how long we could keep holding on before the weight became too much to bear. The fallout from Sarah's visit rippled through our lives like a stone dropped into still water, sending waves crashing against the fragile foundation we'd built. For days afterward, Alex seemed distant, his usual confidence replaced by a quiet tension that I couldn't quite decipher. He assured me everything was fine, but the shadows in his eyes told a different story. I wanted to push him to demand answers, but something held me back, a mix of fear and respect for the storm he was clearly navigating on his own. Then one evening, as we sat together in his apartment, the silence between us heavy and suffocating, he finally spoke. "I told them," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "My parents. Everything." My breath caught in my throat, panic and admiration warring within me. "What did they say?" He let out a shaky laugh, running a hand through his hair. "It wasn't great. My dad didn't say much, just kind of stared at me like I'd grown a second head. And my mom," his voice cracked slightly, and he paused to steady himself. "She cried. Not because she was happy or supportive, but because she felt like I was throwing away everything she ever wanted from me." I reached out instinctively, taking his hand in mine. His fingers trembled beneath my touch, and I squeezed gently, willing him to feel even a fraction of the strength he always seemed to give me. "I'm so sorry," I murmured, though the words felt woefully inadequate. "Don't be," he said quickly, shaking his head. "They needed to know. Keeping it bottled up inside, it was killing me. Maybe they'll never understand. Maybe they'll hate me for it. But at least now, they can't pretend I'm someone I'm not." His honesty left me breathless, stirring emotions I hadn't realized I'd been suppressing. Here he was, laying himself bare, risking everything for the sake of authenticity, and all I could think about was how much I loved him for it. But love alone wasn't enough to shield us from the world. That much had become painfully clear. Over the next few weeks, things shifted in ways I hadn't anticipated. The gossip at work intensified, fueled by Sarah's thinly veiled comments and the growing realization that whatever was happening between Alex and me wasn't just a phase. Some people distanced themselves, their discomfort palpable in every awkward interaction. Others surprised me with unexpected kindness, quiet nods of solidarity, small gestures of support that reminded me humanity wasn't entirely lost. Through it all, Alex remained steadfast, refusing to let the judgment define him. He started speaking more openly about who he was, not just to me, but to anyone who would listen. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I saw the cracks in his armor, when the weight of rejection threatened to overwhelm him. But each time, he found a way to rise again, stronger and more determined than before. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, I began to change too. For so long, I'd lived in fear of being seen, of being judged, of losing everything I cared about if I dared to step into the light. But watching Alex confront his truth head-on made me realize how exhausting it was to carry that fear around. It wasn't just holding me back, it was suffocating me. So I started letting go, piece by piece. I stopped avoiding eye contact in the hallway. I stopped apologizing for existing. And when someone made a snide comment or shot me a disapproving look, I met it with a smile. Not because I didn't care, but because their opinions no longer defined me. It wasn't perfect. There were still bad days, moments when the doubts crept back in and the walls felt like they were closing in. But for the first time in my life, I felt free. Free to be myself, flaws and all. Free to love without reservation. One night, as we lay tangled together on the couch, the soft glow of the TV casting flickering shadows across the room, Alex turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "What are you thinking about?" I asked, tracing lazy patterns on his arm. "Us," he said simply. "Where we're headed. What comes next?" I hesitated, unsure how to respond. The future was uncertain, filled with challenges we couldn't yet imagine. But in that moment, none of that mattered. All that mattered was the warmth of his body beside mine, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the unspoken promise that no matter what happened, we'd face it together. "We'll figure it out," I said finally, my voice soft but sure. "We always do." He smiled, pulling me closer until our foreheads touched. "Yeah," he murmured, "we will." In the end, it wasn't about finding some grand resolution or tying everything up neatly with a bow. Life didn't work that way, especially not for people like us. What mattered was the journey, the messy, beautiful, heart-wrenching process of becoming whole. of learning to stand tall in a world that often tried to knock us down. I drifted off to sleep that night, Alex's arms wrapped securely around me. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known was possible. We weren't invincible, and neither was our love. But we were real, and sometimes that was enough.